Hello, manager. We've reached a new week, a new unit. We are in the almost final laps of our thriving in the middle. Let's recapitulate. How does your organization train its operational level managers? Based on decades of leadership experience and breakthrough studies, our great author Mike Cook established a case for the DDCs for middle management growth, in which application takes place in a culturally founded, experience dependent model. Learn the attributes and processes of better management improvement. Your bottom line and your front line will thank you for it. So, how are you doing? Let's begin. Unit 15, Sonya and what she wants to tell us. Sonya quickly gathered us around the conference room table. I did bring cookies, but since I know you all have time constraints, I don't think we should take a break. Let's just pass the cookies and dive right in. What questions do you have? Okay, so right from the start, Sonya is scoring points. Caroline, Cheryl, and myself are all results oriented managers, and her action focused approach is going to win us over right away. We have the action mindset from the 5 managerial mindsets that we reviewed in our Friday coffee break. You want to check it out? It's a very short 20-minute video reviewing the 5 managerial mindsets from Mr. Minzenberg and Mr. Gosling. As usual, Caroline is ready with a question. How do we get started? She blurts out. Sonya isn't just action oriented, she is also cool under fire. Well, that might seem to be the question, but let me stage it based on my experience. The critical question will eventually be how to get started, but before that, there is an even more important question: where to get started. I don't know if you thought about this, but without sufficient motive, there is no reason for any of the people you just saw working to be in the room. They don't have to be there. It is their choice to be there. It is their choice to show up. They are there because it is in their interest. My curiosity gets the best of me. What do you mean by motive and self-interest? At that, Sonny smiles. Listen, all of you have been managers for a while. Well, I have been involved in management development for probably as long as you've been each managing. One thing we all know for sure is that there is a big difference working with people, whether they report to us or show up in our classrooms, who are motivated either to succeed or learn. Remember the managerial triggers. Success and triggers happen when people are highly motivated and have good access to learning and development and skills learning. Sometimes those two things are one and the same. I can tell you from experience that working with these learning communities is nothing like being in the classroom. In the classroom, I always directing the agenda. People had little at stake, save for the time they were spending in the classroom. Sure, sometimes I got a higher percentage of people in who were interested in learning the art and science of management, but more often than not, they wanted to be able to check the box that said they had completed management level 2 or whatever was next on their annual development plan. I know this sounds harsh, but over the years I sort of resigned myself to delivering good programs and hoping that some of what we offered would stick. This, by the way, is not just my experience. There are lots of research results that back me up. But we persisted in this approach because we were locked into an educational design that convinced us we needed to be running in-house schools or universities. Remember our maxima. Students or managers who learn a course at the university return to unchanged organizations. And that is, my friends, a hit in the wall. Development and classrooms were sort of designed at the hip. It wasn't until I got involved with BEPS groups that the light bulb went off. See, I had been reading about the 70-20-10 learning theory for a while, and before you ask, 70 plus 20 plus 10 obviously equals 100. In this case, the 10 stands for 10% and refers to a formula that makes up a learning experience based on 10% formal or classroom coursework or training. The 20% refers to developmental connections or communities of practice or networking, mentoring, and of course the manager-superior connection that we have been talking. And what about the 70%? I ask, to show just how well I'm paying attention. Hold your ponies, Mr. Wallace, Sonya responds. I'll get there. People in my profession have been faced with pressure from line managers to cut down the time in the classroom for years. So we've seen increased reliance on self-directed learning. Lots of money being spent on e-learning models, webinars, virtual classroom events, and the like. All very high-tech, of course, and presumably less time-consuming than the previous strictly classroom-based models. But ultimately, except for less time in the classroom, this approach has proven to be no more effective than the previous model. Cheryl jumps in at this point. But what about mentoring? Surely that has had a positive impact. At this, Sonia again smiles, but not a happy smile, more like, I'm sorry, I have to tell you this smile. Mentoring, as it turns out, does not lend itself very well to a program approach. People, of course, have good intentions and want to be team players, but then something with an apparently higher priority comes up and poof, there goes the mentoring. The manager-superior connection remains the most reliable source of this type of development, but again, this does not lend itself to a programmatic approach. Time-stressed managers will find ways to circumvent the program requirements. Their superiors often default to narratives that claim necessity when pushed to get involved. Here's the truth. If you get a manager highly committed to your development, good for you. If not, I can't stand it. I just have to ask. But what we just saw was obviously working. Wasn't that a community of practice? Have a cookie run. You are getting warmer. With that, Sonia passes her basket and continues. What you just sat in on was a meeting of community of mutual success. Now give me a little slack here. I am a professional and we always must have our own vocabulary to distinguish our profession. Community of Mutual Success is a name I gave to what otherwise would have been called one of Beb's groups. Remember when I said there was a 70% component, but then didn't discuss it? We all noted that 70% number in the development literature refers to challenging assignments. If you were ever part of an accelerated manager development program, you may recall being moved around periodically through various positions or challenging assignments with the intention of rapidly moving you to higher levels of responsibility. These programs had pretty good track records, but in all honesty, not because the criteria were successful, but because of the selection criteria. Kind of like prestigious universities are very good at selecting incoming freshmen they already know have a high likelihood of doing well in their environment. A self fulfilling prophecy, if you will. What I saw when I began to work with BEPS groups was that there was a diverse mix of management talent in each group. But the way BEP craftily had put the groups together, the one thing they had in common was that everyone in the room was in some way dependent on at least one another person there, who they had no authority over, for their success. Learning to work at increasingly higher levels of productivity with their dependent connection was going to be these folks 70%. Their challenging assignment, and these groups were not made up of senior managers in waiting. They were career, mid-level managers, like most managers are. Remember earlier when I said it mattered that people in the group have motive and some sense of self-interest? There it is, right in the design. These groups are convened by invitation only. No one is required to attend, and the manager cannot attend just any old group. They can attend and become part of a group they have been invited to. Cheryl is quick to ask, who decides on the invitation list? Another good question, acknowledged Sonya. Initially, Bev created invitation lists. It was a bit tricky since she planned to invite managers who did not respect and report to her. She had to do some groundwork with managers in other functional areas. Not all of them were quickly sold on the concept, but Bev was relentless in pitching the self-interest aspect of the groups and the voluntary participation. The groups were formed up around projects in some cases, but what Bev primarily had in mind was groups formed cross-functionally, involving an ongoing process that led to customer satisfaction. And this, my friends, is a breakthrough. This group is oriented to develop or to increase our strategic factor of customer satisfaction or customer care, customer service. This is a crucial KPI regarding key stakeholder customers, and this is very strategic. So, as you can see, learning and development can be purely and merely strategic. It is not just going to the classroom or to the meeting room to learn and talk about some new stuff. It has to be aligned with our goals in strategic factors, in this case, customer satisfaction. What has been an interesting value to the groups is the amount of education that has gone on. Managers are well versed in their functional areas operationally, but not so much across functional lines. I don't know if compassion is a good word to use, but certainly respect has been elevated as the various managers come to understand the challenges their cross-functional counterparts face. And you say results have improved? Pipes in Caroline, and with her ever bottom line outlook. Without question, and in a range of measurable areas, chirps Sonya. Almost always a group was formed, because there was a lag or drag in some customer serving functional chain. In some cases, the lag was identified internally as opportunity, and in others, customers point out the need for improvement. It didn't matter in the end. Improvement was the objective and all sources were considered valid. Cheryl jumps back in quickly. You mentioned a range of measurable improvement. Can you give us examples? Some of the results have been surprising, Sonia informs. There were of course primary goals, which involved process and quality improvements. What came about as side effects included reduced turnover and improvements in engagement scores. Of course, these were indirect results, kind of an unintended good consequences, if you will, but there does seem to be very corollary impact on these measures, where the communities of mutual success have been in place for a while. The group's primary goals are usually satisfied sooner rather than later, in most cases, and then the corollary results follow in time. Sonia, I am sure you get this question from time to time. You mentioned that some groups have been operated for quite a while. I am guessing beyond the satisfaction of the goals for which they were originally established. What keeps them together? I ask this with genuine curiosity, as I know these managers are under demands, like my own in terms of time. Yet, I didn't see anyone looking at watches or cell phones during the session we sat in on. Ron, now you are getting to the real value. It was more discovered than intended. Imagine yourself sitting in a room of people who are openly committed to your success here at Money Pump. Then imagine that in turn, you are as committed to their success each and every one there. Imagine also that in this group you could talk about anything that affected your work, including personal stuff at home, knowing that no matter what was the excuse, you could expect the details to stay contained within the group. How valuable could that be to you? How much attention do you think you put on those 3 hours a month? In terms of making sure you were there. Sonia question stops me briefly. So, you're telling me that was why everyone was paying such close attention in that session? Well, I can speak for everyone there, but the short answer is yes. Caroline, likely the least warm and fuzzy of the three of us, quickly joins in. So then, Sonia, how did you get involved and what is your commitment? Back to the bottom line. Yes, that is a good question. I was invited too, and I sort of auditioned for the role I play in there. This group came to a point shortly after it was formed, when the members realized they would benefit from the support of an uninvested facilitator. They couldn't very well ask their managers; that would diminish the safety in the minds of some. After some discussion, they decided that since there was a previous connection with some of them from the management development sessions, they would approach to me to see if I might be interested. All I took for me was a description of what they were looking for, and I was hooked. Once I met the group and got a sense of what they were committed to, I quickly went from excited to anxious, hoping I passed the interview or whatever criteria they set up to make a choice. The way this was described was a management developer's dream come true. Voluntary participation, safe space for discussion, seeing management excellence as requiring an ongoing practice. Oh, and did I fail to mention focus on talent development? Then there was one more thing, and this was a clincher for me. These folks were mid-level managers who knew they were mid-level managers and they were looking to get better at their craft. Caroline, with her usual impatience, pops into Sonya's explanations. I don't get it. These people were settling for being mid-level managers. They didn't have any higher expectations. Speaking like someone in their way up the career ladder, says Sonya. You are speaking from your own frame of reference, Caroline, as a senior manager in waiting. And it's not just you, but anyone who works with you who knows you are on your way up. No, these people were plenty ambitious, but as they had worked together and gotten to know each other, they began to realize that their skills, talents, and interests were best suited to managing in the middle. They had it, in fact, found their calling, and now their objective was mastery. Where they excelled was in translating senior management objectives and strategy into action, aligned with the key stakeholders of the organization and their strategic factors and their KPIs and outcomes for the corporation. After a few sessions together, they had one thing in common. They knew they were where they belonged, and that their greatest contribution was the identification and development of future talent for the corporation. They were in the best position day to day to observe performance and identify people that had more to offer than was being asked of them. Karen looks a bit taken aback, but recovers quickly. I get it, I know. You're right. I was looking at this from my point of view and through my ambitions. But when I think about it, in my desire to reach a senior position, I also know that these are the types of people I'll be counting on to keep the talent flowing through our workplace. With that said, we turn our attention to the mechanics and details of how we can get communities of mutual success, or DTCs, going in our own areas. Sonya made it very clear that she is now partnered with Bev, and they both had created a connection with the head of management development and his boss, the head of talent for the corporation. Money Pump is ahead of a lot of companies I am aware of, in that the company has resigned many traditional HR functions to areas where it makes more sense. For example, payroll went to finance, benefits went to risk management, and human resources became intently focused on talent acquisition, development, and retention. That became their sole purpose for existing. In fact, So much so that the functional area was renamed Talent, and the term human resources simply disappeared. Nobody seems to miss it either. I mentioned this partnership between Beb and the folks in Talent because their approach is unique, and it took a leap of faith to proceed as they did. Despite their positive experiences with the communities of mutual success, there is not going to be any corporate wide CMS initiative or campaign. Beb, Sonya, and her managers are convinced that attraction rather than promotion is a key determinant of the success of their groups this far. Make it corporate, give it goals, and in no time, participation would no longer be voluntary. The spirit, spontaneity, and organic nature would be squeezed out. Going through their motions would replace the vitality we saw in the group we sat with. Nope, if we are going to get involved, it needs to be on our own initiative. Beb will counsel, of course, Sonia will consult, but we will bear the burden of attracting and developing our own communities of success. As this message sinks in, I ask my associates. So, they both respond quickly. We're in, and so our journey begins.